In 1 Chronicles chapter 17, King David reaches a moment of peace and reflection. After establishing his kingdom, securing Jerusalem, and bringing the Ark of the Covenant into the city, David begins thinking about how he can honor the Lord. What follows becomes one of the most important covenant promises in the entire Bible. The chapter begins with David living in his palace in Jerusalem. Looking around at the cedar house he now occupies, David becomes concerned that he lives in such comfort while the Ark of God's covenant remains in a tent. David shares his thoughts with the prophet Nathan, saying that he wants to build a permanent house for the Lord. Nathan initially approves the idea and encourages David to do whatever is in his heart because God is with him. But that night, the word of the Lord comes to Nathan with a different message. God tells Nathan to return to David and explain that David is not the one who will build the temple. The Lord reminds David that he has never asked for a permanent house since bringing Israel out of Egypt. Instead, he has moved with his people through the tabernacle and temporary dwelling places throughout their journey. The Lord then reminds David of his own story. God took him from tending sheep in the pastures and made him ruler over Israel. He has been with David wherever he has gone, defeating his enemies and making his name great among the nations. God also promises to provide security for Israel. The people will be planted in their own place and no longer be oppressed as they were in earlier times. Then comes the heart of the chapter. Instead of David building a house for God, God declares that he will build a house for David. The Lord promises that after David's life is over, one of his descendants will arise and establish the kingdom. This son will build a house for God's name, and God will establish his throne forever. While this promise points immediately to Solomon, who will build the temple in Jerusalem, it also reaches far beyond Solomon. The promise speaks of an everlasting kingdom and an enduring throne, ultimately pointing forward to the coming Messiah from David's line. God declares that he will be a father to David's descendant, and that his love will never be taken away as it was from Saul. David's house, kingdom, and throne will be established before God forever. Nathan faithfully delivers every word of this message to David. When David hears God's promise, he goes and sits before the Lord in humble gratitude. His response becomes a prayer of worship and thanksgiving. David begins by asking, "Who am I, O Lord God, and what is my family that you have brought me this far?" He's amazed that God would not only bless him in the present, but also speak about the future of his descendants. David praises God for his greatness, declaring that there is no one like the Lord. He remembers how God redeemed Israel from Egypt and made them his own people. Finally, David humbly asks God to fulfill every single promise he has spoken. He prays that the house of David will be established forever and that God's name will be glorified through it. The chapter ends with David resting in the confidence that God's promises are certain. What began as David's desire to honor God becomes a revelation of God's greater plan for David and future generations. The key message of this chapter is that God's plans are often greater than our own. David wanted to build a house for God, but God responded by promising an everlasting kingdom through David's family line. It is a reminder that God is not only concerned with the present, but is working out his purposes across generations. Next comes 1 Chronicles chapter 18, where David's kingdom expands through a series of military victories as God gives him success wherever he goes.